Look, Miami has flirted with disaster all year in college football, and they finally go down to Pitt. One of the upsets over the weekend in college football, and Amin on the call with ESPN along with NFL and the NBA. Busy guy, and we appreciate a busy guy joining our show here on Big Board Sports 104.5, the team ESPN Radio in Albany. Adam, Roger Weiland, Chris Honorado, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are you doing?
We're good, Adam. Appreciate a few minutes. And I guess we've seen this before out of Pitt, right? Didn't they beat Clemson a couple years ago when they were the top team? And here they are knocking off number 2 Miami. What was that like, and how surprised were you to see Pitt do it against Miami?
You know what? I'm not shocked by any means. We were sitting in the booth. Actually, we were down in Orlando. We were doing the game right after that in UCF, USF, but we were sitting there watching the game the whole time. Our buddies Bob Wischusen and Brock Heward were talking about it during the game. They said, listen, this is a Pitt team that has a tendency to do this. And I think the bigger point that they made was that Miami feels a lot like a big game team. They're a big game team. So when the atmosphere is big, when it's a Saturday night in South Beach and Notre Dame's a top 10 team and they're coming in, hey, we're ready to play. We've got that swagger. We've got the turnover chain ready to go. Our defense is primed and ready to perform. And then you go into Heinz Field where the seats are half full and Pitt's, not playing for a whole lot as they come in at 4-7. And Pat Narduzzi wants to close the season strong. And sure enough, like they did against Clemson a year ago, they knock off a top 2 team. And this is a tendency that Pitt has had the last couple of years. Teams have a tendency to play down to what Pittsburgh's doing, and the Panthers have a tendency to play up. So we were watching it right along with you guys and just kind of surprised at what was happening. Malik Rozier at quarterback, who's been so good this year for Miami, looked very poor. And I was surprised, in all honesty, to see Miami play as poorly as they did. But I'm not surprised to see Pitt play as strongly as they did in a big game to close their season.
How are those press box accommodations at Pitt? Because UAlbany, and I do play-by-play for UAlbany, Adam, they open at Pitt next season.
Well, it's Heinz Field. It's an NFL stadium. I've done so many Pitt and Pittsburgh Steelers games there over the last probably 5 years, and I've seen some good ones too. You'll love it, man. That's a great place to see a game. It's right along the Three Rivers. I think it's on the Allegheny, if I'm not mistaken.
That'd be right.
And it's just a really nice place to see a game, and it's a great facility. So you're gonna have a great time next year, bud.
So your predictions posted on Twitter now with Miami losing, and obviously Alabama goes down to Auburn. Clemson 1, Oklahoma 2, Auburn 3, undefeated Wisconsin 4. Which I don't disagree with any of those. But then my question would be, where is Alabama going to be sitting tonight?
I think Alabama is going to be at 5. Because now we're comparing Alabama and Georgia, right? So we're looking at 2 one-loss teams. Both of the losses have come to Auburn. Both of them have come on the road at Auburn. Which loss was more, quote-unquote, more impressive? Georgia got shellacked by Auburn, and they got run out of Jordan-Hare Stadium. Alabama was in position to be in that game the entire way. It was a dominant performance by Auburn, but Alabama was only down 2 scores most of the game, so they were still in position in the fourth quarter to have an opportunity, and they just didn't play very well down the stretch. So if I'm comparing those 2 teams that have relatively, I would say, similar resumes, in all honesty, and I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, Alabama's resume is not all that impressive overall in the full body of work scheme. So if I'm comparing those 2 teams, that one loss separates Alabama just ahead of Georgia as far as I'm concerned. But now let's remember, guys, Ohio State made the playoff last year without playing in its conference championship game. Their only loss was to Penn State, the team that won the Big Ten eventually, and Ohio State still got in the playoff over Penn State. So Alabama could find itself in a very similar position after this weekend, where they don't have to play in a conference championship game, but because it's one loss, it came against a potential SEC champ, and it's still Alabama, and at their best, they're probably one of the 3 best teams in college football. They could still get into the college football playoff, which I don't think is unfair, but in this particular circumstance, it's going to have a lot more to do with what Wisconsin does and with what Oklahoma does and with what Ohio State does.
ESPN play-by-play voice Adam Amin with us here on Big Board Sports 104.5, the team ESPN Radio. Adam, I mean, it sounds like Bama can't get in unless really a couple of things go their way, right? Like Oklahoma would have to lose to TCU. Wisconsin would have to lose in the Big Ten title game. And I'm just going to make the assumption that Miami gets in if they beat Clemson. Where do you kind of fall on what we might see conference championship Saturday?
Yeah, I'm with you guys on that. I'm kind of feeling almost a play-in game. This is almost kind of like a quarterfinal game between Miami and Clemson in the ACC championship game. Both are one-loss teams with a lot of quality wins. Obviously, if Miami beats Clemson, and I think Clemson will be the number one team on Saturday, that's a huge win. I think if Miami wins, they've earned themselves a playoff spot. With the lone loss coming on the road at the end of the season, I think that's absolutely worthy of getting in if they beat Clemson. If Clemson wins, there's no question that I think they're in. Their only loss was on the road at Syracuse. Granted, Syracuse did not play very well down the stretch, but they didn't have their starting quarterback in the second half of that game. Kelly Bryant was injured in the first half of that game, and they only lost by 3 points. So I think Clemson at their healthiest, which they are right now, they're the best team in the country. If they win, they're in. That's a quarterfinal game for me. I think it's a play-in for Wisconsin. If Wisconsin wins, they're 13-0, and they're in the Big Ten, and they would have beaten Ohio State. It's a travesty if they don't get into the playoff. I don't care what their strength of schedule at this point is. They're in a Power 5 league with a championship, undefeated. They deserve to be in. And I think if Oklahoma wins over TCU, that's a play-in game for me for Oklahoma as well. I think if those three teams win, now it's becoming a little bit hairy for a team like Alabama because you're probably looking at the SEC champion getting in over Alabama at this point. But if, like you guys said, if TCU wins, say Ohio State beats Wisconsin, as good as Ohio State can look, I don't think they're a playoff team. And I don't think they get in with 2 losses compared to what Auburn's done as a 2-loss team to beat Georgia and Alabama this year. So Alabama's just kind of sitting back, and they're really hoping that Ohio State wins and TCU wins coming up this weekend.
Auburn's playing awfully a lot like the best team in the country. I can tell you that right now for sure. What about Ohio State, Adam? I mean, I can't really make a great case for them because they get destroyed by Iowa. That's on the resume.
You know what? Yeah, absolutely. And here's, there's a lot of playoff hype for Ohio State, and there typically is. And remember, they've gotten in the 3 first years of the playoff, they've gotten in under interesting circumstances. They had the loss early against Virginia Tech in 2014, and then they kind of got hot at the right time, and people were saying, well, maybe they shouldn't be in because of that loss, and TCU or Baylor should be in. Ohio State ends up getting in and winning the championship. And then last year, the circumstance we played out where their lone loss is to the Big Ten champion, but they get in over the Big Ten champ. So there's brand recognition there. Ohio State's a very popular team. They're going to have some push in that room, I think, to at least be considered. But they don't look like one of the 4 best teams to me. And the goal of this is to get the 4 best teams into the college football playoff. Now, resume does matter. It's not just eye test. It's a blend of eye test and resume. Who did you beat? Where did you beat them? How dominant have you been? And I have not seen enough from the first Thursday night of the college football season when they got tested for a half by Indiana to getting shellacked on the road at Iowa to not being consistent enough and being so much better in terms of their talent and not showing it on the field. I don't buy them as a playoff team, so I don't think they're really in at all. I think they've got a shot to play in a major bowl game if they win the Big Ten championship, but I don't think they deserve to be a playoff team because I just haven't seen the consistency from them. And if we're comparing 2-loss teams, Auburn has been much more consistent. Their 2 losses have come to LSU, a very solid team, which is right now Alabama's best win, and against Clemson, who is the number 1 team as far as I'm concerned in the country, and they were within 1 score. So I think Auburn has a much better case as a 2-loss team than Ohio State does as a 2-loss team.
If you follow Adam on Twitter, and you should, at Adam Amin, you'll find out he's something of a foodie, but also calls NFL games on ESPN Radio. And Adam, I know you were in Kansas City, so I'm guessing you had some barbecue, but you also saw the Bills with Tyrod Taylor after trying out Nathan Peterman for a half. What did you see out of Buffalo? Is this a playoff team in what appears to be a down AFC this year?
I think they've got a shot, and that's what they're playing for, obviously, down the stretch, to get into the wild card. I don't think they're going to win the division. I don't think most people believe that they're going to overtake New England, although, hey, you've got a couple of shots down the stretch. What an interesting schedule, by the way, down the stretch. You get the at times hapless Colts who gave the Titans a pretty good run this week, and then you get the Dolphins twice and the Patriots twice. Destiny's kind of in your own hands. If you go maybe 3-2 during that final stretch, that might be enough in this AFC to get you into the playoffs. So even if you lose to New England both games, they got a serious shot to get 3 wins against Indianapolis and a Miami team that can't seem to figure itself out. So I think they're certainly within striking range. I think the defense of this team looked really sharp against Kansas City. I think they won up front. That was the big key. And that's really what Kansas City's been struggling with during their stretch right now of 6 games where they've lost 5. Buffalo won the trench warfare. They had Jerry Hughes eating up Eric Fisher most of the game. I thought he had a great game the other day. I was really impressed with Matt Milano out of the linebacker spot. Kyle Williams and Adolphus Washington were really disruptive on the interior. So defensively, if they have a performance like they did against Kansas City on Sunday where they're winning up front, I think they're good enough on the back end to really hang with just about anybody in these last 5 games in the AFC schedule. So I think they've got a shot. They've definitely got a shot, and I think Tyrod should be the guy going forward. I think they've just got a better opportunity to win on the offensive side of the ball with him at QB.
Well, I'm certainly glad that McDermott came to his senses after I'm not sure what he was thinking, but whatever it was, it's out of the way. Nice experiment there with Peterman. But, I mean, I don't think Taylor's great, but he can beat you with his feet a little bit, and I don't think he threw any interceptions over the weekend.
No, he did not have a pick. The very well played, well managed game. I know 16-10 isn't going to blow anybody away, but I mean, I'm sitting there with Bill Polian on Sunday in the booth, and we're watching this game and going, this is a really interesting chess match between Sean McDermott and Andy Reid. Obviously, everybody knows about their relationship going back to the Philadelphia days, and I thought McDermott outcoached Andy Reid. I thought he made the right moves. They dialed up the right defenses at the right times. They blitzed when they needed to. They dropped back when they needed to. It was a really well-called game plan on the offensive side. Really good possessions. Again, it's not coming out with 1 million points. It's not going to impress anybody when you just put up 16. But it's a well-managed, well-played game, relatively clean, no picks from Taylor. There's a mix in offense. They ran the ball effectively when they needed to. Again, LaShawn McCoy's numbers aren't going to blow you away, but he made big runs late in the game. Hey, here's a drive extending run to get a first down. Here's 5 yards on second down to set up a manageable third down. Those were the types of things we saw from Buffalo. They're not going to be sexy. They're not going to be anything overly impressive, but it's enough to win games down the stretch in this schedule. And, hopefully for fans in your area, for their sake, to end the longest NFL playoff drought.
Adam, you're the best, man. We appreciate a few minutes. I know you're busy. Thanks for taking some time for us here on Big Board Sports.
Anytime, guys. A pleasure as always.